Proper introduction, perfect timing.
Nice.
The exposed Mr. Hashbass joins us.
Yeah, I'm exposed. I can't. Oh, wow.
No chapeau for Mr. Bash.
Oh, how embarrassing.
That dome is wide open.
What did I do? How embarrassing.
Josh Covert.
That's all right. You guys get the dome.
Attorney, activist, advocate, CEO of Meds Cafe and other industry
And all around hairy
projects.
guy.
Yep.
There you go, Harry. You found one.
Yeah, of course I find one, man. I keep them at
Too much escapes too fast if you don't have one of those things on.
No, yeah, man. I haven't got necklaces handy. They're coming. There you
Welcome
go.
to the show, Josh. Thanks for being here today. Thanks again for tuning in, Adam, as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Here.
Rick Thompson, obviously.
Jamie Lowell.
Yep. And,
Not so
not so obvious. I got the hat on, incognito. It's one of our great sponsors, Real Leaf Solutions. And we're going to be joined by some other people today, I believe. Maybe Anton, maybe Rob Robar. Talk about some federal stuff that's going on. Stuff in our state legislature and other list of things and wherever else conversation might take us, I guess. Kind of disturbing. I had a really good meeting with Representative Coleman, who has been his third term as a state house representative, and who was also going halfway through the term going to be involved in the election for mayor of Westland, in which case he would step down and somebody else would come in and take over for the rest of that session.
Just to remind you, we didn't play the sponsors video. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's do that, and then I'll come back to this conversation. Thanks for reminding me. And the sponsors video. The intro was done properly, and their countdown was perfect. I didn't hit the sponsor video at the right time, but it is correct. I think so. That'll be the first time that all these things are correct at the same time. Anyway.
Everybody knows Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Stone Depot, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, that Detroit Nutrient Company, GrowGreenMI.com, Custom 420 promos with their CultureClothing.club, and Meds Cafe.
For like about 6 weeks, Josh, we just said Meds Cafe every time, and it wasn't actually there. So that's a little bit of a.
That's all good.
Josh should change his name to Sherlock because I love that pipe in his hand. That's awesome.
Well, thanks. One of the proxies, the Pupco proxies.
Proxies.
Is that what it is?
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Concentrate in there.
Cool. All right.
I'll be honest. I have one. They're great. The only problem with any of those things for me is learning the buttons. And I get confused how many times to push the button. But other than that, the proxy is a great item. I mean, a really good item.
Yeah, it's nice. It's something you can put in your pocket. Whereas, the other Puffcos, by the time you put water in it and it's so big, it's maybe hard to just move around with you. But this is something you can totally move with.
I put my rig in my overalls pocket the other day because I was leaving the house and I forgot it was there. And I sat down in the car and all of a sudden I could feel the water because, of course, why take the water out? And all of a sudden I could feel my leg getting wet. And it ended up in the cup holder where it belonged. Right, Counselor?
And you confirmed that it was the rig.
Oh, yeah. I did confirm it was the rig, yes.
I could see you just starting to feel some moisture in your pant area, and it.
Why does
Leave it to Jamie to make an incontinence joke. Yes.
I know.
Well, that's okay.
But anyway, I got the feeling that just getting back to the conversation with lawmakers, that the new composition of lawmakers, a lot more people interested in establishing conversation early on with them on cannabis issues. I'm sure many other things too, but from our perspective and our efforts and stuff like that. I was encouraged. I got the idea that they understand the basic litmus test, the problems from last session. The idea that more communication when stuff is being introduced or discussed to get to more stakeholders, to have a stakeholder group. Kevin Coleman talked about going to speak with Representative Carter, who is the head of the regulatory reform, and establishing a rapport with him and establishing a stakeholder group for these issues. Spoke with Robin from MSCIA about their work on legislation. She was in support of having the stakeholder groups and getting discussion on on these things, and it just seems like we might get a return to what we how we used to kind of deal with some stuff a few years ago, and it was very noticeable how things were just getting rammed through around us a lot in the last session by because we wanted to get some stuff done without much interference or concern for other perspectives and stuff. So I did feel pretty good about that. We did stop the MCMA. They apparently officially dissolved last year, the end of the year. So that was good. We still have some big money interests out there with big lobbying groups connected and that type of stuff. So those are concerns. Was feeling pretty good that there wasn't much to deal with, but then I guess some articles came out, and Rick definitely took notice of Shelley Edgerton discussing some ideas for legislation in this next session, and I think we see some of the same kind of trends of self-serving kind of approaches and ideas that are not necessary, and that we might not want to support and stuff like that. So there's going to be some discussion about moratorium on some activity with the saturated market, and that centers around a lot, obviously, cultivation. That's where there's a lot of product, and discussions have happened. It's happened in other states. They've tried it. Some people like what happened in Oregon and that kind of thing. It's generally popular with a lot of cultivators. And we say, okay, if you're going to do that, then we cannot, also discontinue the some of the social equity applicants. That there has to be a provision to allow those processes to continue on, and that type of stuff. But they were talking about in this article, Rick can confirm, I believe, that they want to also put a moratorium on retail stores.
They did.
Yeah.
I've been spending a moment here because I have two computers. I'm spending a moment here trying to look up the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association website, and it's mysteriously disappeared.
I would be interested in checking with the state to see if they dissolved the corporation.
Well, they did let their license to lobby lapse. Their license to lobby was not renewed in December. So
that makes sense because, that makes as much sense to me as those people that have gone and gotten lobby licenses because in order to do the work they're doing, that's what they're needing. I understand letting your stuff lapse. My question is, did they close the corporation?
Good question.
Or are they just taking a hiatus like some of these other groups may have?
Yeah, that is interesting because she did use the organization as part of her title, I think, in this article.
Yeah, at least 2 since December. I was expecting it to never see Shelley Edgerton, chief executive of the MCMA ever again, and now I've seen it a couple times. Now it's possible that she can just be, title surfing, right? She achieved that. Now she's just going to use that as to make her relevant to media quotes in the future. But without a website, I mean, come on.
These are written quotes, right?
Yes.
No offense to my journalistic friends, but the media fucks it up all the time. A reporter looks at Google, reads an article, and associates and attributes things. The counselor's nodding his head and attributes things to people all the time that is just not true at all, never was true. My grandfather didn't serve in World War II, and the flak jacket they took when they raided my house never belonged to him. And nobody ever said that. That was all completely made up by the reporter. So I mean, it's happened to me, So I wouldn't be surprised if they look at her and drop that as who she was.
Let me say this, though. I've been misquoted by media many times. I've
Just
had
agreeing with you.
hundreds of quotes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
but the fact is, almost every single time they ask me about my credit. How am I to describe you? How am I to credit you? Are you still this? For this, and it's hard for me to imagine that two professional reporters didn't bother to check her credits before publishing after December. It's also possible that those conversations took place prior to that dissolving, but I think we are looking at a world where we don't have the MCMA as a big, huge lobbying interest to deal with. And I like Jamie's conversation point where he said that might be like talking to the legislatures of old, where we actually had people who wanted to listen to us and who were not poisoned by the money available from lobbyists and their dangling dollars in front of their face.
We're not void of that, but I think that there's more reasonable processes that allow for contribution and
right.
Kind of the stuff that way back when there, I think might have been one of the last times there was the Democratic control before recent history, and it was Cushenberry had created a stakeholders group and had I can't think of the other guy's name now, run it, also from Detroit.
I know.
And his son is now, and his son is now a. Well, man, but that
it's gonna bother me that I can't remember his name.
And I can't think of it either. But there were some good discussions. There were really good people participating in those things. A lot of information that people didn't know still, like today, that came out and was able to be considered, and to at least have that opportunity. And that's actually one of the things we got support with from some of the lawmakers was pointing out how we were bypassing these discussions, and many of them did not like that.
Well, the election of 2010 brought us Rick Snyder and a Republican House and Senate, and that ruled for 8 years until 2018. And that really was the 8 years that were super important in the development of the cannabis industry and the cannabis community here. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to, borrow Adam's phrases when I say cannabis community, but we added a lot of people on to the medical community during those years. Thousands of people came and registered for cards, hundreds of thousands actually. And unfortunately, a lot of them were discouraged from doing that by the way that the rules were interpreted and thrown down. Josh Covert knows what I'm talking about. There were a lot of things that we took for granted that we saw as plain English in the 2008 Medical Marijuana Act that the courts interpreted in a way that seems nonsensical to plain English.
And worse than that, the state never admitted that it would allow you to drive and not get arrested for a DUI.
Yeah.
The states never put that information out because the Attorney General has never talked about this. This seems to be the only law that they've never issued a statement on.
Which one?
Like the marijuana laws. They've never told this Michigan State Police how to behave.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
They do it on every law that ever passes.
You read their publications from time to time and see how they now are going to handle it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. This is the one thing that they've never said anything. Instead, they let the police run rampant. So in some parts of the state, the cops are still arrested.
Well, and I would say even worse, the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, went around and specifically discussed how to be more restrictive and prohibitive and force stuff on this.
I have a friend whose car was seized, and as the police were doing it, the young officer said, "I might be making a mistake here."
Well, I can tell you that in the early days, the first 3 years of the cannabis laws, the medical cannabis laws, the Michigan State Police would issue these updates, and they would say, this is a new court decision that came down, and this is how you're supposed to interpret it. We wouldn't always agree with the Michigan State Police updates, but they were at least issuing them. And then they stopped. And that's really where, in my opinion, 2014 maybe, when they stopped issuing those things, that's really where the dichotomy got really bad. Jamie and I had a police encounter where the guy literally said, if you were in the county north of us, I wouldn't care about this at all. But because you're in this county, you're getting written. And it's just crazy to have that kind of a distress there.
That comes from we don't like your kind.
And
100%.
I thought we got rid of that type of behavior.
yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do with what judges and what precedent had been set, or how the prosecuting attorneys handled it as well, because we'd see a vast difference not only from the law enforcement side, but also, from the judicial side or the prosecuting attorney, that some counties wouldn't, charge people or would easily dismiss cases, and the other counties, neighboring counties, would aggressively prosecute it. And then the judges would give unfavorable rulings. So we saw that with so many different types of cases, just in terms of how they're played out through courts.
And Josh, you did a lot of child protective services cases, and I know that there was a big discrepancy between how CPS was handled in different parts of the state.
Yes, definitely. There are certain counties that have I would say have a vastly different approach, and were more aggressive at removing children or getting involved, trying to seek jurisdiction, things like that, when marijuana was involved, for sure.
I mean, look at Oakland County. They're the classic example.
I was just going to say that.
Filing a motion so that you can't use the words medical marijuana at trial. Holy shit. Adam L. Brook goes to trial and can't say medical marijuana? Fuck you people. I'll take your 2-year plea bargain and go to prison and have a good time. It cost the state over $150,000.
Yeah, and there's Adam was in Oakland County, where they really had all these like strategies down to fuck people with this. There was I want to say there was 3 separate times when the jury asked the judge if Barb Agro was a medical marijuana patient during her trial. And refused to give them the information.
It's always awful down here. Sorry.
What?
Rob Robar, how you doing, man? Sorry, I didn't really introduce you.
No, it's all good. Like I said, didn't want to interject on anybody. But yeah, no, Oakland County has always been so shitty.
Right.
That's where I'm at. That's where I've been my whole life.
Wasn't it the Supreme
where Adam was
Court?
nailed? Yeah.
Wasn't it the Supreme Court of Michigan that called Oakland County frequent flyers?
Yeah.
Well, you guys are frequent flyers around here, aren't you?
You don't say that about a county when you're the Supreme Court.
They did in their case.
Shows how right we were in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we lost, like in the early days, people that come into the industry now just don't appreciate that. In the early days, we were fighting for interpretations of the 2008 law, and the Court of Appeals, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh and Jamie, I know you guys know this number, but we lost like 19 times in a row. The Court of Appeals said, no, stoners, we're not going to give you any rights 19 times in a row before we finally got a win. And I don't think that, that signaled a whole cascade of wins.
That win was short-lived, kind of
victory.
Yeah, I agree. And we had that one of the Supreme Court justices, I believe it's Supreme Court, if not a Court of Appeals, was went around and discussed how to, with the with like the circuit courts and stuff like that, how to deal with this issue in ways that was, prohibitive and restrictive and would fuck people, as opposed to being broad and liberal, so to speak. O'Connell.
If this was about race, it wouldn't be allowed to be spoken. If they were treating different races like they treat us, you wouldn't hear about it. Okay? We went through the civil rights movement already. That involved race. Now we're talking about actual civil rights that belong to everybody. And the state has a long way to go on this one.
There's that issue of making cannabis users a class necessarily, although clearly it's like it's there and it's been treated as such, in many ways. And
right.
That
There's
type
a bar
of
on every corner with a parking lot.
Well, we can thank the news cycle for some of the hassles that we have, because they continuously tell people that, alcohol use goes down in states with legalized cannabis, and that there are fewer, alcohol fueled incidents and beer sales and whiskey sales and wine sales. So the alcohol industry, which is hugely powerful here in Michigan, gets scared every time the word cannabis comes up, and they don't want anyone to associate positive benefit from cannabis use. They don't want to encourage communities to adopt cannabis use. In fact, there's discussions out there right now that to forbid festivals in Michigan from having both cannabis and alcohol at the same festival, because they're going to start spreading fear of people who are driving with both cannabis and alcohol in their system, and how they're going to create all these crashes, which you've never seen as realized.
At the same time, today we call them the CRA, we call them a bunch of other things in the past. They brought up that might be a good thing to be able to mix alcohol and weed at events. It was their idea, not ours.
It's a good thing for there to be an alternative for a lot of people, and
It's happening regardless what anybody wants to do, honestly.
well, unless they change the law, that's the
Well,
thing
yeah, obviously, you know, but I see so much of like what's been happening over this last year and same stuff I'm involved with, you know. Hopefully, you know, we're seeing the positive side of things. We're seeing, you know, the intertwining of different things and people figuring out that there are avenues to let this happen, meaning, you know, facilities that have concert venues, have alcohol sales all in one space, and it's
Right.
happening all over. And we're finally figuring out how to do this.
Yeah.
And again, whether or not they can be intertwined, we'll have to see in the end, honestly.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I'm not going to drop names, but there's some major players that bought some sponsorship, partnered up with some other major players in the music business, and their names all over it, and they can't sell cannabis at those events, but they know you will be able to in the future because they can lobby for that.
sounds kind of like Loom at
really?
Pine Knob.
Yeah, it's exactly who I was talking about. Okay. And wait a minute.
You got to drop that presence. I mean,
truth be told, it's not Loom. It's 313 Presents, which is much bigger than Loom. It's every concert you go to in Detroit is a Loom sponsored group, a Loom supported group. So if you really want to protest, stop buying those tickets.
313 Presents is tied in with Loom. I did not know that.
Well, 313 Presents is the former Illich Holdings group that sold all the tickets, and I can't remember what they used to call themselves, but they became 313 Presents, which now controls everything.
How are they connected to Loom, though? I mean, because
Loom,
don't get that.
Loom partnered with Pine Knob. That's controlled by 313 Presents.
Okay.
That's a pretty tenuous connection. Just because.
Okay. Just wondering where the connection was. I had not heard that before, so it's not like they're an umbrella. Under the umbrella, they have a relationship by business that you're.
There may be a
correct. And as soon as they can put it everywhere else, they will. Talk to the 313 Presents.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
They're waiting.
Yep.
Well, and with adult use rules now in Detroit, which sparks a whole new conversation about whether or not we should have cultivation or retail moratoriums right now in the state of Michigan, now that Detroit's finally opened up. All the adult use that's going on there, as Adam mentioned, all of these music venues, large and small, are looking for extra sources of revenue. And if cannabis companies can now jump in and say, you know, Cobo Hall sponsored by Green Peak, right? They can do it.
Right.
If you could just offer openly, no issue, you can smoke here at this venue. I mean, that would be really strong. It happens anyway, just like
right.
Like a lot of stuff,
if you go to Detroit, you smoke weed in the venue. I mean, if you don't, you're just missing out on your own.
Yeah.
Right.
You
know,
picking up everybody else's stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we're already doing it.
The difference between already doing it and doing it with a legal right.
Yeah, without having to look over your shoulder, just having fun, and no
sure,
issue. That's a much better state of mind, man.
Personally, I'll just reference Hoxeyville up in north. You know, here. And now that we've established
these guys,
these
guys had something to do with it.
My friends, and you know, seeing what we did last year there and what they did really. I was just kind of there, but seeing all that is something that is so much more than like these just cannabis consumption events where I'm going to throw a party and do this. It's like a 30-year existing festival, you know, being able to offer those things, let's say a weed tent, you know, or consumption, whatever you want to call it, a space where that can happen and be a part of a normal festival is, you know, because nobody's leaving. Nobody's really driving out of that place. You know what I mean? And having that experience is something that I think everybody really wants to see and have, which again, look at these. The event lineup for this year is stacked. I mean, if you're into that type of music or in that type of scene, which I kind of am. But seeing that now is like, wow, we can leverage this so much larger. Like, we learned a lot last year. Let's make it even better, and not have events that are just cannabis consumption.
Well, Josh, you're CFO or CEO of Meds Cafe there, Chief Operating Officer, I guess. How valuable would it be to you as a retail presence to be able to partner with a music event like that, to be able to do something a little bit more than just have a booth there?
That's something that it'd be great. We'd like to do something like that. I think primarily really just to normalize cannabis and have it be a part of a otherwise event that's been taking place, and have that exposure for just normalization. I think is most important, not really from like a financial benefit. That really wouldn't, I don't think, be the purpose, but I'm all about that. I wanted to say I was at Hoxeyville this summer with my family and spent the whole weekend there, and it was beautiful. The whole event, the way they did cannabis was very well done, where I consumed cannabis outside of the area and didn't get a hassle, but I'm sure some people that were there with their families or kids might have preferred to be able to go back into an area where they could consume it, and provide that buffer. So I think at a place like Hoxeyville, you kind of had it both ways, where you could just consume while you're watching the concert out front, which is what I chose to do and didn't get hassled. And then other people could go and purchase and consume cannabis in the enclosed area, and it worked great for them. So, that was a great example.
Don't forget, the only thing they're using against us is odor. That we offend other people by our odor, so they're not going to allow it. That at these festivals, I think we're going to have a lounge that only, is at the top of the hill. You can't smoke weed on the hill, but you can smoke in this lounge. Why? Because somebody's going to go complain that, hey, that guy's smoking weed and it bothers me.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the normalization thing too. And Josh mentioned this as well. A great reason why you'd want to sponsor something is the normalization. And if people are smoking cannabis in front of other people's children, it's tough for them to say that's dangerous, don't do that, when they see all these other adults around saying this. And I mention this because Arts Beats and Eats, which is a huge festival known for its alcohol consumption. Yep. They said last year that in 2022 that they were considering allowing cannabis sales, but that they were going to hold off for a year and see how things like Hoxeyville and then a second event performed where they had both a mixture of alcohol and cannabis too. And I think Josh's point about normalization of cannabis really is one of the reasons why Oakland County doesn't want cannabis in Arts Beats and Eats. When people start getting used to cannabis will pop up everywhere, especially the places where those folks don't want it to.
I'm going to tell you that Arts Beats and Eats doesn't have cannabis because it's in the city of Royal Oak that doesn't allow cannabis.
It stretches over multiple cities, though. And they could have a cannabis consumption lounge in another city, though.
Ferndale is.
Ferndale, they could in Ferndale, and there's no reason. There's no reason they don't in Ferndale. To be honest with you, there's nothing stopping them.
Oh no, that's the thing. I mean, honestly,
and you can sponsor anything you want as a licensee. There's nothing stopping you from sponsoring something. There's only stopping you from metric sales. There's nothing. You're muted, Jamie.
I think if the city wanted to, as an aside, or what could be if Royal Oak wanted to work with the Eats Beats and Eats on that, they can get I think if once a year, without it being formally part of their ordinance, they can get agree to have an event.
Yeah, but Royal Oak specifically does not want marijuana in the community. They've already thrown it out. They pushed it out. There was a dispensary in Royal Oak for years.
Well, they have an adult use ordinance passed with licenses being issued. I thought
that's
none of
brand
open,
new,
as far as I know. Sorry.
Royal Oak's got two of the top probably licensing lawyers right downtown, right there, with big successful businesses, but then they don't want to allow the businesses that allow that business to actually operate, which I find to be kind of strange.
I can't tell you what happened in my car the day I drove by, and there was this lawyer had the word cannabis as big as any sign in the city of Royal Oak And I would drive by it every day smoking a joint thinking, well, I ain't never going to have to hire this guy. I mean, times are changing, right?
Yeah.
And I think Josh might be referring to Barton Morris and David Rudoy.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Great guys. Yeah.
I do
Both of them have
believe
been on this
Barton,
program before too.
I do believe Barton also now has a new law office somewhere else, and it is not. I don't believe it has the big cannabis law firm sign on it. Like they're specializing.
Might do separate stuff too. I think, yeah.
Right. They're specializing in Royal Oak on that, which
Mhm.
to me was a huge slap in the face because Royal Oak worked so hard to keep this out that it took 2 election cycles to get rid of the people that didn't want it. I mean,
Yep.
Yep. So Red Setter says, let's get some access in the surrounding areas outside the cities. Our townships are struggling. That's kind of connected a little bit to what we were discussing about Shelley Edgerton and Livewell. I mean, they also want to stop retail licenses, put a moratorium on those also. And those are probably needed. Whereas, you can argue the saturation of product might need to get looked at in some way. And, but
the best part about saturation is the neighboring communities that have nothing. They're slowly figuring out that, oh shit, we should have probably gotten on board back when we had the opportunity, because not only did our neighbors allow 1 dispensary, but there's 6 or there's 12, or look at Ann Arbor. Look at
yeah. Well, you would think you'd figure it out, but Pittsfield Township for the longest time, right in between Ipsy and Ann Arbor, still held off.
2021 and 2022, those examples of great success existed, and very few communities came online both years, even though $50,000 per cannabis retailer is a pretty strong incentive.
Well, it took Celine years to figure out the math.
Yeah.
That all this money was going right next door from all these people driving from our community to go there to get it.
And so Loom stopped their process on the space they were putting together. Yeah.
That was a coveted place too. At a Michigan Avenue address. They'd overpaid like $12 million for the property, $12 million over asking price. So they really, really wanted it, and then had to back out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
For who?
You look at Waterford alone, where I'm at, and now there's 2 or 3 that are open now. And they didn't opt in for anything beyond recreational until recently. So, I mean, honestly, it's like one of those things that's like, you have 2 or 3 spaces here, and if they keep it that, it might be beneficial for everybody. But if it becomes, say, 18 different retailers, which I don't know how many they're talking about here, honestly. But you just see it, it's like, I hope whoever does set up shop here does something, and not be the ones where, this guy Mintz and the Looms and all that shit, you know what I mean? But I'm literally in Pine Knob's back door. The fact that we don't have a bunch of places right here is just nuts. Literally why Clarkson doesn't opt in.
I can answer all of that and comment on Dr. Alone's statement. And that's because we currently have people making rules that have never smoked marijuana in their life. They really think that the horrors that they've heard are true. Okay. I mean, they bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I can't go practice law without a law license. You shouldn't be able to issue a marijuana license unless you've smoked marijuana. My concept is that we put a sesh together and we invite the legislature to watch like gladiators. Look, we're not killing each other. People aren't, there's no rape, there's no pillage, there's no you know, oh, look, the guy's wobbling. Well, he sits down and relaxes for a while. And then 20 minutes later, he stands up. He's fine. I mean, these people have never seen this stuff, which is why it's important to smoke in Lansing at our Capitol gatherings so they can see what happens. But I literally want to put a sesh together and invite them all, let them watch us, because I'm shocked.
Mhm.
I remember like when years ago when we were working with Rep Colton, which is his own story that has his own bit. But many times we were hanging out, you know, and he was drinking and we were all smoking down a lot. And he would make the comment, "It's amazing how much you guys can smoke and still be so coherent," you know. Like there's the lesson for you. There's your idea. There was only one lawmaker though.
Right.
Of course, he was you know, nipping from his little flask the whole time.
Yeah, he was getting drunk and we were getting stoned, but
yeah, but a couple drinks in, you know, he's been drinking.
Yeah, but you know, we talk about the communities being very, very slow to come online, and I dig it. They are, and when we wish it would change, but it's difficult to overcome 80 years of government programming. I mean, they've been pumping into our heads since we were little children how evil cannabis is. And if you have never had a cannabis experience, or if you don't know anybody in that world, it's easy to just fall back upon those you know, almost foundational beliefs about right and wrong. Josh, what do you have?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think it hits it right on. That the thing is, I think talking to people makes the biggest difference. So those legislators, those city council members, I guarantee you, if they don't use cannabis, they know someone who does, whether it's a niece, a cousin. And if those people could actually have honest conversations with them, I think we'd see a much different result. But too often people hide it. They're like, I don't want to tell grandma. I don't want to tell my aunt. But if that person respects you and you're doing you're a contributing member to society, successful, and you tell them, hey, I use cannabis, I don't think that's that negative effect that people expect. And I think having those conversations is how you get to sometimes those legislators, those city council members, because they know someone who uses cannabis. And if those people speak out more, I think we end up with a little different result, even if they didn't use it themselves, you know.
There was a time when we wanted to know who in your family, to the legislators, who in your family has cancer, who in your family has this disease, who in you don't know? You haven't heard that we can help you, whatever the situation was? Well, maybe you should look at it that way. You know, I mean, I'm not one that prays, but if that's what it took, I'd pray for that to happen, so you could learn your lesson. And if you chose not to, so be it. But it's certainly out there for you.
The easiest way to overcome that program when we talked about is to either have a personal experience with cannabis yourself, or to listen to the story of someone whose story you're interested in and you trust. We oftentimes would bring mothers with young children who were sick into the offices of lawmakers in order to make our point. We would bring veterans who had healing stories, or elderly people who told tales about recovering use of limbs and things, and it affected very few people. You know, right. We didn't get them to come to Jesus very often for compassionate reasons. And when we talk about social justice reasons, even fewer came to our way of thinking. It was when the almighty dollar was dangled. When Colorado started showing you exactly how many millions could be made off embracing a cannabis industry, that's when 2016 came around. That's when the MMFLA was formed, when they realized this is actually, there's a way to make money off these stoners.
Well, and I'm going to take that a little farther. I think once this group was formed of heads of the CRAs, and I forgot what that was called, that our last guy was a part of, but that nationwide group of all these CANRA,
Cannabis Regulators Association.
Right. I believe that group, when they got together, they said, oh, by the way, enforcement. That's another issue, that you get to enforce these licenses that you have now distributed, and you can start making money on enforcement simply through your fine system and your investigations of things that may not quite be right. And it's happening in California. They're using the environmental laws to go after legal and illegal grows for that matter, but because because pot's so popular and everyone thinks it's been legalized, they have to use their environmental laws to say, look, they're stealing water or runoff or all these other issues so that they don't look like fools for going after potheads.
There's just no zeal amongst the citizenry any longer to go after cannabis consumers for possession or for use, and even for businesses too. People just don't support over-regulation of the cannabis industry. And environmental rules are one thing everybody supports. So if you can make the cannabis industry guilty of the one thing everybody likes, the environment, then you've really sold this whole cannabis is bad thing once again to the people.
However, California does have some asinine.
No shit.
Yeah, there's some situations there that are probably
diversion of water.
not defensible.
But
ban pesticide use. Yeah.
Right. But they have some bad environmental law too.
Mm-hmm.
Because that pendulum kept going. It didn't just get so far. It was classic California law, which we would expect.
Yep, which features a heavily supported environmental regulations. You look at their automobile emissions regulations, power station standards, things like that too. It's very difficult to do things in California because of the regulations that they have, and that does set a standard for the nation that's a little bit higher than people would probably have if they didn't have California as an example.
We all remember watching The Price is Right. The car came with California emissions.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay. I mean, and then emissions became so bad that Michigan had emission testing, and then they figured out it was such bullshit that they got rid of it. Yep. So once again, we're back at the same nonsense.
Well, it's not unusual for us to recognize there's a problem and then come up with one bad solution after another. And sometimes that's how you come up with a good solution, is by having a couple of ideas that didn't work out well. But the emissions control was always a drag. And of course, if you ever want to look at some really disgusting pictures, go back and Google, Los Angeles smog photos. Yeah. From back in the day before the emission standards, a whole dirty cloud would sit over the city, and people would breathe and live and raise their children in that.
I don't know if it was true or what it was based on, but used to hear all the time that, like, if you jogged around LA for an hour, it'd be like smoking a pack of cigarettes or something like that. Something similar to that.
I mean, that we understand that. We see what that was about. This seems to make no sense. What we're going through seems to make no sense. And what other states are going through. New York, they pass a law that has a bunch of things that are much better than what we got, and then they change them. Why? Because somebody said that, the law said you could smoke in any place you could smoke a cigarette. That was the law, except certain parks, because you can't smoke a cigarette in Central Park, but you could in Gramercy Park. But the people on that block didn't appreciate all the potheads showing up, so they changed the law. You can't smoke in any park now in New York. But you can smoke on your stoop, and they used to arrest thousands of people in New York for walking out their front door of their apartment building and being respectful and sitting out front on their steps and smoking a joint instead of blowing up the building and stinking up the building. The guy'd go outside and smoke a joint, and he'd end up arrested for that.
And most people don't realize in New York, there's no backyards in the city.
Correct.
You don't have a backyard to retreat to.
Correct.
You have an alley behind your building, and it's a shared living space. So,
and worse than that, there's no city or county jails. There's Rikers Island. So everybody got taken to the worst place in the world until they bonded out, just for smoking a joint.
Yeah.
Those days are over, fortunately, for most people.
I mean, look at when you go to Las Vegas, where it's adult use, recreation, medical, whatever. But you can go to a hotel, you can go purchase it, but you got nowhere to smoke it.
Right, because they make their properties non-smoking properties.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like one of those entrance, and when you talk to anybody, when you check in, they say, oh, well, nobody's going to pay attention, just go off to the side. But still, it's that whole thing.
Well,
Like you have use, but you can't use.
Right. It should be better than that. It has to get there a little bit. Yeah.
there's
I mean, there's
there's
more
a com-
consumption type places, but who wants to just go to some place to fucking smoke? I
Right.
mean,
There's-
seriously.
there's a common thing popping up in the baller world where now people prepay the smoking fine when they check into the hotel. So it costs me $125 for the room, $250 for the smoking fine. I'm happy to pay you your $375. Don't fucking knock on my door.
Yeah, it just, I see that's happening still in this state as we move forward with these things, like, events or whatever, oh, we have consumption lounges, but I mean, cover charges to go smoke weeds. I'm sorry.
Well,
There's, it just points out the fact that there are a lot of ways that we still need to improve our laws. A lot of people thought that after 2018, when we got adult use in Michigan, their job was over, and we're discovering we have to shepherd the law in. Two of the subjects we wanted to talk about today include, changing law to accommodate people, like a federal bill that proposes to give medical marijuana patients their Second Amendment rights back, and another bill or another proposal that was shot down by the FDA, where they would potentially regulate CBD as a food additive and allow for the flourishing of that particular industry. And instead, they punted that back to Congress and said, it's beyond our scope. There are too many dangers involved with the CBD. We can't regulate it the way we normally do. So, Congress, you have to decide what's next.
Oh, yeah.
So, we have lots of work to do.
Yeah, for sure. And then everybody's still operating in the rough in that world. You know what I mean? Like,
you brought up the Second Amendment, and the interesting thing is, it's the only right. It's the only right in the Bill of Rights that they can take away from you. They can violate your other rights, but they can take away your Second Amendment rights, which because it's part of the Bill of Rights, the federal government actually has a restorative program and has had one for years. They just choose not to fund it in the budget, so it doesn't happen. Which most people are totally unaware that you can go to the federal government and get your rights restored, but they don't fund the program. So when you go to the ATF and ask for the paperwork, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Well, not that I'm a big fan of these guys, but one of the Wolverine Watchmen was arrested for the fact that he was possessing guns while he also possessed his medical marijuana. He had the two of them together. Now, we know that in Michigan, if you're committing a felony in possession of a gun, it can be a 2-year mandatory. They use cannabis laws, in discriminate ways. And it's a discrepancy that needs to be resolved.
That's such an ongoing question. People ask that all the time. Josh, what's your latest perspective on the concept of a medical marijuana patient also, being a gun owner
or a CPL holder? Forget about being a gun owner.
Yeah, that's tough to answer because it involves both federal and state law in some ways. As far as the state goes, I don't think you have any issue, owning a firearm and possessing cannabis. If you're using cannabis and they consider you to be intoxicated, that could be an issue if you have your firearm. So usage, alongside, or at the same time with the firearms, probably not a good idea. As if they can show impairment, which is definitely a whole nother subject, that has a lot to talk about. But generally, I think you're good. The problem is what happened with the guy with the Wolverine Watchman is when he filled out his paperwork, he indicated that he did not use cannabis. Well, and later on, I think they found out through his brother and his father that he may have been. So
I'm going to make a statement that is not 100% true, but every pot smoking gun owner has already lied on that form. Now, there's a chance that
totally.
Because if you don't lie, they say no.
But maybe they weren't smoking pot. Maybe they weren't a pot user when they bought their guns. I don't know. But and that's why it's
Correct.
not 100% accurate. But the reality is, if you were a pot smoker, you've already told that lie to the federal government and signed your name to it.
For sure.
I
Yeah,
did.
well, they say you have a duty to update it. So if you started using, they would say you have a duty to update that application. Now, the problem is it's not widely enforced, right? And they went after this guy for what I believe, not because of the cannabis and not really because of the firearm. It's because of his political views. And they're unpopular political views. And that's the problem, is that cannabis can still be a way the government can get involved in your life because of your political views, which I think is a completely anti-American, especially when we've recognized cannabis to be a legal part of our society, you know? And so it's still a tool and a way in.
Which is why it's important in this state to get a medical card, because it's a vote against that. It's a paid vote for a few bucks. You can tell these people, I'm one of those people, and you have to take us into consideration.
And it's so cheap to get the card. $20 a year for 2-year increments, $40 for 2 years to get your card. It's probably the least expensive in the United States, although I think there may be some states that offer them at no charge. But
well,
Red Setter Farm says they took that question off the Washtenaw County form. And this is a form, we're talking about this federal form that you have to fill out when you purchase a firearm.
Correct.
Okay, so if you're a firearm owner and you just don't ever purchase a firearm, the federal government doesn't ask you any questions because they're unaware of your dual cannabis user firearm owner status. But as soon as you try to purchase one, that's when they want to census you. And I just have a hard time being prosecuted because someone checked the wrong box on a form. Right? That's not technically lying to the government. That's, that could be explained as a mistaken understanding.
Yeah, well, I have a hard time not being able to protect my family. So you people work at fixing this, and I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, the problem that we have here in the federal government is, first of all, there's just no zeal to do anything pro-cannabis in the House as it's currently being run. Although there is a zeal for pro-gun laws, it's possible that this may have some legs from that. I still don't see it getting out of the House. If it gets to the Senate, I believe the Senate passes it because they've been that particular group of people have kind of supported cannabis law reform for a while now. But the other thing is it specifically mentions medical marijuana users, and I don't understand why we would allow medical marijuana users the right to protect themselves and own guns, but not allow adult use cannabis users to protect themselves and own guns. Well, it seems like a perpetuation of an old discriminatory program.
They allow opiate users to do all that. You just need to get a note from your doctor. Oh, wait a minute.
Probably with some kind of similar concept where there's you have to use it medically. So
right, weeds is being treated differently. I get opiate scripts from my doctor. That there's nothing preventing me from owning a gun because my doctor prescribed me opiates.
But would it break down at being like if you're under the influence of opiates at the time of using them?
Exactly right, which is why you can't carry a gun into a bar.
Yeah, and drive technically using opiates, even,
Right.
I'm not a lawyer. He is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sometimes it's just laws on top of laws. We already have mechanisms to really control the danger, right? And that is, if you're intoxicated and you're using it, that's a crime. We don't need to criminalize anything other than that because that's the danger potentially to society. So we just create laws on top of laws that really don't get us any further until making anything safe, right? So I'm all about having responsible gun use and responsible gun ownership, but I don't think we need laws on top of that. And I think, the primary law there is don't use it if your judgment's impaired by whatever it may be, controlled substance wise, alcohol, anything like that. I think that's just a wise, prudent thing.
I would love to put together a weed shooting event because there's a lot of gun owners in the weed game. They all go hunting in November. And I'd love to put together at a gun range a competition. But it's completely illegal. There's no possible way you could do that. I'm not even talking about a competition that I'd really like where we smoke and then we shoot, because if there's some impairment, it might make a difference. I'm just talking about the fact that you couldn't advertise that a bunch of potheads were going to be at the gun range having an event.
You couldn't.
Yeah, no.
That just goes back to what we talked about is outdated information. People believe that because you're using cannabis, you're no longer able to somehow make intelligent decisions. But I'll tell you that people on cannabis are more likely to choose a pacifistic solution to problems than they are to reach for a sidearm in order to resolve conflict, man.
Go to any bowling alley and you'll see that.
Well, honestly, in my opinion, when you look at like the amount of veterans who consume cannabis, who, guess what, 99% of them own weapons, just, out of whatever, military background, hunting, whatever. And, look at it. We already see the numbers. You already see that, there isn't some great thing about it. It's just a matter of that whole dichotomy that still exists, that normalizing that we talked about before helps erase. We have an opportunity to do something different now with the aging politicians are going out, the ones that are, our parents' age, I'm 55.
We're one generation of die off is what it's called. And
sure.
It will be a lot better. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
No, and you're looking at it now, if you see everybody from the late 60s. I mean, it's unfortunate. I don't want to bring this part of it up, but really, honestly, look at everybody who's a musician, who's now our idols, who are now dying. They're at that age. And a lot of politicians fall into that same realm. And it's not that, nobody wishes death on anybody, honestly.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just one of those things you see happening that there's, maybe we're in the, where the boomer politicians are starting to erode, and we're finally have an opportunity to maybe move this conversation a little bit farther down the road, which is just sucks that it takes so long for us to do this. Because like everybody here, we've all been doing this shit a long time and pushing for things, just trying to, like, I seek to normalize mostly, like when my conversations are like, this is me. This is what I do.
I think we've come a long way because there's a lot of people out there that think marijuana has been legalized and that there's no problem and everything's good. And what are you people bitching about this, that, and the other thing? You got your legal marijuana. Well, we don't have legal marijuana. We have controlled marijuana or some regulated marijuana. And it's these small issues that these people don't even know still exist. They thought the law changed,
Well, and then it can boil on back down to, the consumption of it. Like the remediation conversation that's happening, even in the last couple of days and a while. What are people consuming? What are people, doing all this? It just kind of rolls back hill when people feel that it's legal. I don't have to worry anymore.
I got a remediation ad in my news stream today.
Oh yeah,
for an actual product, and they
like a Willow machine or something, yeah.
And they explained that this is how they clean it up before they put it to market.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the sales pitch.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I get it that there's some aspect of somebody wanting to do that, but it's just, as the consumer goes, to me, it's always something that, because I'm a consumer, we're all consumers, whether or not it's our own stash or it's our, we're buying it somewhere. These two for $70 ounces, we all know that's trash, but that's what's being pushed. That's, Detroit market.
Tasteless, flavorless, without character, right? Those are typical things that we would associate with cannabis that's been remediated. And I will say that regardless of what the name is on the outside, Pineapple Express doesn't smell like pineapple. But
here's the problem. I don't want any laws that are going to put people in harm's way. I don't want remediated cannabis. However, I want a law that says if you remediate your cannabis before you bring it to the state for testing, you're in violation of the law, and you're going to get fined for it as a licensee.
Look, I'm fine with just labeling it. If
Right, but
if this is a technique that some people use in order to be able to make sure that their crop passes every time, that's the only way they can ensure solvency.
then
And
label
there's
it.
a market that really doesn't care about the remediated. They're really about that $35 zip. Yeah, I scored big at the cannabis dispensary today. There's that always going to be that market, but just let people know, let consumers know.
But I do believe the state is saying we already have a law that requires remediated cannabis to be labeled.
Yeah.
However, the way the system works, it's not happening because it's being remediated long before we ever tell you it failed.
Before first testing. Yeah.
There is
retested.
So there's no law that requires a label stating remediated cannabis on the product. There is a law that requires the metric system to be notified if there's remediation that takes place at that point of the life cycle, as Adam described.
After first testing.
And your metric tag tells you everything I just said is my point. It's labeled. It's if you look at your metric tag and you go look that item up, it'll tell you that it's been remediated.
If it was, but you don't know if it was remediated before it went for testing the first time.
It's before. I mean, it should be illegal to own a remediation machine.
Everybody should have to register theirs with the state so that you know exactly what companies are using it, and that be public information. So if Ubaked wants to
restrict it altogether, or let the consumer know if it's been done.
Yep. Yeah, just make sure that's available. I know Colleen wanted some more information on the CBD.
Yeah, that's what I was about ready to get back to. Hey, Josh, you don't mind, I know you might have to go pretty soon based on our previous conversation, you coming on the show, but if you do have a minute, people are confused about CBD products. Do we still going to see them at gas stations and all other stores wherever they can be put? Or I know Rob knows about this. He's been in the business, a little bit too, and there were some law changes and stuff. Where does it stand right now?
I haven't really been keeping up to date with some of the more recent stuff with CBD. I know from my view that a lot of it's still uncertain in regards to how that's all going to, end up playing out. But if there's been the recent developments, like I said, I probably have been so busy doing other stuff the last little bit.
The products at at a cannabis retail store, for example, they don't come through the metric system. Somebody can have a company and that has a CBD product, and it's just.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would like to know more about, honestly, within the confines of the state, is conversion oils. The HHC, Delta 10, this, that, or this. That my former company, we sold Delta 8. Beyond that, I have a problem with a lot of things, and it's just mostly like safety issues and inhalation and these types of things that we just don't. We always say everything about cannabis or hemp that we just don't know yet. Whatever.
Well, if the CRA is now going to be responsible for CBD, and it's going to fall under their guides, and they're going to treat licensees in any way, shape, or form differently, who's going to call and talk about the CBD product at Walmart? Who's going to let the CRA know?
Well, there's going to be a difference between CBD derived from hemp and CBD derived from cannabis.
Yeah, but someone's going to go and check
in the
all
license
this
system.
stuff out.
There's really, on the federal basis, there's no difference. The US FDA just released a big statement. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, well, the hemp is not on the controlled substances list anymore, but cannabis still is. So there could be,
So they still restrict CBD though. The FDA is not making any distinction between the two. I know that it seems like there should be, but the FDA is making no distinction on CBD and its derivative, its origin.
Yeah, they're not like saying it's okay to mix it into foods and that it's has any particular properties to rely on or something like that, and they don't want to do that, right? Which is slightly separate, but that's true. Yeah.
A lot of them are sold as inactive ingredients.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's where you have, and honestly, there are products getting through federal licensing containing topicals and things that have, and it's just simply a listing of just saying it's inactive, which I don't really know what that means, real honestly.
It means it was imported from China using Chinese hemp.
Well, I mean, like, so all those different, molecules that can be made from CBD, that was made from CBD from hemp,
hmm
is an interesting question, and how that, it would be handled as far as, I guess the state says if it's going to be sold, or if it's going to be put into commerce, then it has to be done under, this umbrella, and you have to stick to that maybe. But just the fact that it's like the way that it is now federally legal makes it, I don't know if it's viewed any differently,
I mean, I can literally walk to the party store over here, less than a mile away from my house, and buy HHC cards. I don't know why anybody was, and if you ask the people selling, they're like, oh, they don't sell. Well, guess what? We got legal weed. I mean, honestly, what do you need that shit for?
Because they've been conned into believing that it helps them.
Well, again, there is a certain segment of that. And like I said, like my former company did sell Delta 8.
And so to try to sell it anywhere without the other steps that have to be in place to.
Yeah, no. And as I saw that it helped people. It really did. The cancer patients and people like that, it didn't spin their head as hard as, Delta 9. So it kind of helped them. So I felt good about selling those products. Now, as we move farther, it just seems like, when I read about, THCP or, THCA acetate, it's like, what are we doing? Like,
what about
just snow people and sell product?
Right.
What about skirting the laws? And that's all you can say. I mean,
well, what about like the THCM that Sam the Skunk Man talked to me about? That he said if I try some, I have to come to his house because I'll be on his couch for a couple hours after I take a hit.
That's an excellent selling tactic right there. I love that. I would definitely do whatever it takes to get on that couch.
I mean, wait a minute. I'll let Dave know you said that.
Yeah, Sam. Yeah.
Sam, sorry, I dropped his real name. But the point is, I can't believe I did that. The point is that I work with John Sinclair. What's going to get you higher? How can we make this stuff get you higher? What can we do to the weed to get you higher? I want to get stoned.
Yeah, but that's not the purpose of CBD. That's our conversation surrounding CBD.
Oh, yeah, no, it is. It's just the offshoots of it, because that's how it's being sold. Sorry.
Right. It's all, they do one, they do the other. They're going to ban something that is safe, and the other stuff has no chance.
Yeah. No.
So, here's the problem that we have as far as the federal thing goes that we talked about with the FDA denying the opportunity to use it in foodstuffs. This is what they said about it. They said that scientific studies show the potential for liver harm, interactions with certain medications, and possible harm to the male reproductive system as the 3 scientific reasons why they don't want to regulate CBD in the same way that they regulate other foodstuffs. And those, to me, are old wives' tales. Harm to the male reproductive system.
Did they include the studies that they rely on to assert
this?
Is
just an article that summarizes. I wouldn't be able to tell you because I haven't read the entire FDA thing, but typically they do have subheadings and then reference right down. So
and they're not wrong. They're not wrong with some of that stuff.
Interaction with medications might be true, but I think that's true of almost any substance, right?
Correct. And people should know that.
It's.
I mean, the
But
male reproductive
the
system,
amount of medications. So
the male reproductive system. I'm sorry, I was born in the 60s, and so were millions of other people. Oh, wait a minute.
I got 3 kids to dispute that claim. Let me tell you.
Right. Wait a minute. They're talking about a study that said it took your sperm count from like 5 million to 3 million. It takes 1.
Also, look at the age of the people that there might be taking a test of.
Yeah.
Just it's a natural.
Josh had to split.
But, I see that.
It was nice.
What a great time it was. I love having this perspective here. But my point, I guess, when I mentioned those 3 arguments is just to emphasize that this is still drug war fever going on.
Yeah.
Some of the myths of the
Reefer
drug
madness,
war.
alive and well.
Oh,
It
yeah.
sure is. And the federal government is one place where those old drug warriors can hide and still be influential.
Well, they
Not
can
too
hide
many
everything because we can't even get, like taxation without representation. It's
Well,
all of this.
not too many people are willing to say this, but I will. Reefer madness has changed color. It's no longer about going after the black and the brown.
Yeah.
It's now about, we don't want to look stupid that we believe this misinformation for all these years. So we're going to keep promoting this misinformation. It's not bad information. We've proven the bad information is bad. Talk to me about brain cells, and I'll scream at you about Reese's monkeys for hours.
Well,
I know.
And I will tell you, last year normal. Go ahead, Edmund. I'm sorry.
I just was going to say, I know that study inside and out because it was easily beatable.
So Normal issued a statement that said there were 43,000 studies done on cannabis last year on different cannabis properties, which was the largest number of studies on record. And it's true that some of those studies did find fault with cannabis and the way that it interacts with the human body. Many of them found benefit, but some of them found fault. And there's a big history of cannabis being found at fault for human ailments because that's all the NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, would approve. Those are the only studies they would allow to happen. So there's a big body of evidence that it can be cited there, but to ignore all the positivity that's come out and to ignore studies from international sources, not just from American sources, that's really not the scientific way. That really perpetuates lies.
Respected international sources.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at all the studies in Israel and all that.
Well,
I mean,
that's an anti-Israel thing.
Sometimes the studies are presented in a way to make them seem more causal than they actually can really be.
I experienced this
responsible for.
I experienced this personally during a hospitalization at one point. A doctor came in to tell me about the study that he did personally about marijuana smokers and how much damage he found in their lungs. And I said, you're full of shit. Prove it. And he brought up on his phone his study. And I said, let me read it. And as I read it, I see that some of these people smoke nicotine. Some of these people drink alcohol.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain to this guy that for the last 30 years, my severe asthma has been somewhat under control. I've had my issues, but mainly under control because I smoke high-grade weed and my lungs relax before anything else. And he didn't want to hear it because he did a study. And I said, but your study is wrong. It's not accurate. It doesn't talk about me. And this cat spent 45 minutes trying to argue with me. And I mean, you're wrong, buddy.
If you don't eliminate tobacco smokers from your study, then it's not a true study of cannabis smokers. If you don't eliminate societal factors like living in a smog-filled location where you're more likely to have lung damage or family history of potential lung damage too. If you don't zero out those factors when you're doing your study, then we're supposed to be skeptical of the results.
Well, and that's why all those studies that were done that proved negatives, if you actually look at them, you can find where they made their error in their study.
And it's easy for people to assume, based on what we do know about tobacco smoke and what's been seen, that just similar to how people assume that if you use cannabis you drive weird or something like that. Just they match it up with what they know, driving, drinking, and bad issues and smoking tobacco.
They make the logical leap. Yeah.
I see that with my international friends that are smoking foreign tobacco as opposed to American tobacco. They're smoking non-GMO, non-chemicalized, non-slow burning tobacco, and they don't have the health problems that we have in this country. On the whole,
growing up, my grandpa, he used to hand roll cigarettes. He never bought packs, and it was some pipe tobacco probably. I don't really know, but a lot of it was very much. When he died, they were like, his lungs really for a lifetime of smoking weren't what we all thought they should be. Like he died because of other reasons.
I had a scope done of my lungs, and I made sure that my pulmonologist knew that I smoked copious amounts of marijuana. And while he was in there, I wanted him to prove the damage that it did. And then he pointed out that there was this thing growing. And when it disappeared, I pointed out that what was the issue? I mean, the thing that was growing was the thing that was growing. It went away on its own. I have healthy lungs.
It was probably a plant.
It was right. I might have inhaled seed.
You inhaled a seed and it just grew in there.
But I have healthy lungs, considering I smoke cannabis, and they think that it's the worst thing in the world. And I asked them, I said, you're going to be in there. Please look for it. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, no, when I was in recently too, when they, do all the testing, different things, it's like, that's the one thing about me that isn't messed up really is the lungs. And, it's all that. I'm not a tobacco user. I never really have been. Maybe when I was younger, I tried, but I just never cared for it. It made me sick, really. Just like, ugh.
I like a cigar, but only for maybe the first third, and then I'm done with it because I love the taste, I love the experience, but it gets right to me. I mean, all that raw tobacco just really, I'm not used to it, and it overloads my system, and then it makes me nervous, and I get a headache, and my hands tremble.
Nicotine is a powerful substance.
It is. It is.
It's a dangerous substance. It does horrible things. And I was a cigar smoker for years. All through my first wife, I was a cigar smoker.
I did for a while too. Just mostly cover up the weed smell, honestly.
Yeah. But I was only good for 2 cigars, and then it was time to be done because my body was doing the nicotine thing. It was affected by the nicotine, and I never understood. I was in the head shop business when it got popular. I never understood the blunt. I don't understand why would you take one substance and mix it with another substance?
They do that in Europe all the time. They mix tobacco and cannabis.
But there's a reason for that. The reason why that's done in Europe is because tobacco, I'm just trying to get my terms right. Marijuana is very hard to get. It's not as easy as you think. And
so they stretch it out.
So they stretch it out by.
But my image always was it was shitty pot, so big. So like.
A lot of that, but even in Amsterdam, all the Dutch people, we call them Dutchies, and you can buy pure tobacco pre-rolled. You can buy mixture. The hash joints that they sell are tobacco mixed with hash. They would never do what you and I do, and that is take a bunch of weed, put it in a paper, and then sprinkle a bunch of hash over it. They would never do that. That's all.
I love that though.
Yeah.
I love it. Like it up, baby.
Old school hash coming back.
That's all I do is smoke hash.
Yep.
I do lots of dabs and stuff, but I love old school hash. So
it's interesting to see how consumer trends that go though. I mean, you can see how certain social economic groups of people were pushed things like white owls and the swishers and all of the tiny little cigarette-like cigars, and then the backwoods came out, and that was pushed to a completely different set of socioeconomic people, right? Mm-hmm. The skull smokers, the skull,
the pack.
A lot of people, including connoisseurs of sorts, still like their fucking big ass blunts, man.
But marketing was effective to both communities, even though it was different products, but advertising trying to get the same result though.
But they are using the nicotine appropriately. The nicotine is opening up their blood vessels a little bit, and it's allowing that cannabis to hit them differently than the cannabis hits guys like you and I who don't mix it. So I understand
or getting the nicotine hit on top of it,
Little bit of a
or
rush.
some combination
Right.
thereof.
They
right?
get a
Cannabis
little
and
bit of a
alcohol,
rush
cannabis
out
and
of it.
tobacco, cannabis in combination with these other things, it does enhance that experience. You know,
Right.
that's the truth.
But
I like
But
cannabis along with everything that I do.
then you get to the things like the backwoods, and then you get the government saying that they're going to ban all flavored tobaccos, and now you got a problem, because now you got a whole industry that's about to go nuts because they won't be able to get mentholated cigarettes or strawberry flavored tobacco to wrap their weed in.
Yeah, no, I used to work in designing packaging for vape industry, and while that is what it is, it's one of those things that you see, it's been decimated. I mean, it's just completely been decimated. And the one thing that I will say on that subject really is that when we stop looking at harm reduction and like, okay, you take out 99% of all the shitty chemicals and provide
Right.
just has nicotine, or whatever. Not that it's safe, not that it's the thing, but the reduction in harm is just something that I have a problem with personally. That I'm just like, why? Like, why is that demonized versus that or this? But it led to all this other things with the flavored tobacco, like all that we were just talking about. You see the backwoods, you see the and now they're all becoming imported.
Right.
So
Well,
that opens up a whole black market of people who, until this completely gets cut out, is
Well, and depending on where those imports are coming from, some are more questionable than others.
oh, for sure. I'm sure, especially if they're, that's like, you look at the e-liquid industry, and you now taking out most of the American players. Most everything is produced in China now, as far as the disposables go, and there's no traceability. We have no real thing of understanding really what they are. That's why they kind of go after those things.
And they have to. I mean,
Vape pens have, really, the quality in some instances have slid down. We now have some people that absolutely don't believe that they want any metal in their vape pen at all because they believe that it causes problems. There are other people that still embrace the vape pens themselves. When we talk about banning flavors, which they've done, they've made Juul ban certain flavors of e-cigs. That's not because those flavors themselves are individually harmful. It's to discourage use of the product itself. So
Correct.
The government says, I'm going to allow you to continue to exist as a product line, but because I think you're inherently dangerous, I'm going to put extra restrictions on you. That's a contradictory statement. If you think it's inherently dangerous, don't put the extra restrictions, just do something dramatic to the industry. And damn the capitalization consequences. Err on the side of caution when it comes to human being safety.
They did that with the gummy game, where we can't have a gummy shaped in anything that might be attractive to a child. However, you can walk into any grocery store and buy vitamins that are gummies that are shaped like things that your kids would be interested in. Now, vitamins aren't necessarily dangerous, but I would think if a kid ate a whole bottle, he might not be doing so. He might not be feeling so well.
Yeah.
But that's allowed. They can do it.
Well, we can't expect logic within cannabis rules. As much as we try to encourage them to use logic, they're still slowly shedding the fetters of the drug war hysteria. And the Michigan State Police still having their own say in legislative hearings and consulting with groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving when it comes to cannabis issues. What the hell do they know about it? When you start to continue to perpetuate some of those old myths, that's how this kind of shit goes down. Where Adam says, you can have a dinosaur as a vitamin, but you can't have a dinosaur as a gummy with cannabis in it. That kind of contradiction really doesn't make sense. But it's one of those things you just have to work through.
You can't have a gummy that looks like Santa Claus. Santa ain't even real.
As somebody who designs packaging and does those kind of work, the one thing that I was really surprised to find out as I was working on some projects was that I can put a cartoon image on a pack or a pre-roll, but you can't do it on a pack of gummies.
Right. You can use cartoon imagery on any kind of a smokable cannabis substance or a vape cart,
Which is,
because
to
kids
me,
are not
like
going to eat
this.
the vape carts. It's only edibles. Only
But
edibles.
but look at the news stories that are put out there.
Oh, I
You
know.
hear
You see them a lot these days.
But you hear these news stories about the one kid that brought the gummy to school. Well, they never write a news story about the one kid that brought weed to school. They just suspended him. That's how they used to handle it, you know?
Yeah, you see that a lot right now.
Right.
I see various people sharing these stories too that are dispensaries, which is interesting to me, because they'll share a story about oh, we can get a free, like a lockable bag or whatever.
Right,
And
right.
to me, it's every time you read those stories, it's like,
Well,
at what point is the parent ever responsible? We have all had kids.
but we treat our kids differently because I never smoked in front of my children.
Exactly.
Okay? I didn't tell my children it was medicine.
Yeah, it wasn't until recently. I mean, 5 years. My kids are older now, but
Right.
as they got older, it's like
That's different. But my 7-year-old and
they're all
my 7-year-old thinks I smoke cigarettes because she comes in my office and she sees a bunch of filter tips sitting in the ashtray. She accused me of smoking cigarettes. I said, I don't smoke cigarettes. And I left it at that.
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not going to explain that it's cannabis. My
lock yourself up.
my oldest daughter was outed at school. His daughter was outed at school because read about me on the front page of the newspaper and went to her. Read about me on the front page of the newspaper and went to her. Someone's she came back home and said, Dad, what is hash bash? She was in the 2nd grade. I had to explain to my daughter how me and thousands of others get together to protest the government because we have an issue with the government. I wasn't going to explain marijuana to her. She was in the 2nd grade.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But that's what happens. I mean,
and that's, when it comes down to like the exposure.
But I also have friends that all they do is talk to their children about it and how it's medicine and how it helps. And, this is daddy's medicine and you don't touch it and you leave it alone and you're this and you're that.
You take the curiosity out of it, then they're less likely to try and get into it when you're not around. If you explain what it is, then they already know. So now they're not exploring with it. They're not experimenting with it. They've already figured it out.
Both
just like
my kids have no interest.
Yep.
Right.
Like you just don't. And it's,
they don't understand intoxication. They don't understand the medical need. Medicine is something that's given to them, not something they request. So if you explain that it's medicine, that's less interesting to them, actually.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, just, again, we can go all the way back to the original thing we were really talking about earlier, the normalization. But then it's also like, as a youth, as a different thing, just being a responsible parent and just, I mean, just too many aren't. And that's what they launch in on, and it sucks. You know what I mean?
For the record, to the viewers, Jamie has been clemented, is the term we use, named after our dear friend Richard Clement, and he had to go outside to smoke his joint because he's not allowed.
Disallowed. And there are times when Adam is clemented also. So
Well, I'm sitting in a hotel right now, so I can do whatever the fuck I want. But I have been. My daughter is clemented. My daughter has clemented me because she says that I smoke in the house and she smelled it and it bothered her. And I no longer smoke while my children, I no longer smoke flower while my children are in the house. But she wasn't accurate in what she was saying because me smoking weed in one room didn't cause any problem for her in another. She smelt it, but that was it.
Well, but what we really emphasized here is there's different ways to approach cannabis with your children, different ways to approach it, even as adults, adult to adult. I have 3 children. 2 of my kids smoke cannabis and one of them does not. So I have a little bit of a different protocol when I'm with the one that doesn't. And the fact is that's the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't mean that I need to make her conform to my world somehow because I'm I have an inferiority complex, so I have to express dominance in order to defeat that. No, you just roll with it. That's what makes her happy. I want her to be happy, so that's what we'll do.
I figured what was going to happen with my older kids was that one day, and they were athletes growing up, that one day someone was going to say, hey man, I'm going to smoke a joint. Come with me, or we're going to sneak around the corner. And my daughter was going to say, no, I don't do that, but I'll come hang out with you. At which point she would smell it and she would say, you know what? My house smells like that, because I had a room in the back and the whole house stunk like weed, but I could hear the kids coming. So I put my shit down and they never saw me smoking. You know, my son did once report to my mother that he saw me smoking a white cigar on the front porch because he knew I smoked cigars. So I got busted on that. But I figured that my kids were going to figure it out that way. Ended up that my son was 19 years old, celebrating his birthday in Detroit, and he came to the dab house to see his father. And all the fellas are like, hey, it's his birthday, give him a dab. And I'm like, no, he's got to drive home. I ain't giving him shit. It's not going to be on my responsibility that there's an issue. I don't want to hear it from the family.
That's really jumping into the lions down there. I mean, if you're a newbie to cannabis and walking into the dab house, wow.
Well, he wasn't a newbie. He was in Tennessee living with his buddies. He was smoking. Okay. I said, hey, you're in town. You got to check out this place out. He comes in. The fellas are all like, the guys on death row were like, no. You got to give him a dab, man. We're going to give him a dab. I'm like, all right, give him a dab. He took his dab. He was happy. Now, turns out that my son has some mental health issues. My son cannot smoke cannabis. My son cannot use cocaine. My son cannot use heroin. My daughter, his older sister, works for the sheriff department. She don't use it either. So my older two children, they don't use cannabis at all. I don't use it when I'm around them. Never have. My son was 19 years old before he ever saw me smoke.
Every family's different. Every family has a different way of accompanying. And as long as there's love and there's honest answers to open questions, right? Then that's the important thing. It doesn't matter at what age you introduce them to the fact that you are a cannabis smoker, whether you let them see or whether you don't see. Each family's different. And that's why it bothers me when people from outside judge. And it bothers me even more when people who don't use cannabis judge cannabis users and our lifestyle and the way that we choose to raise our families when they've never had an experience like that. And maybe it's a human condition that we want to always exert an opinion on things, or that we feel like we're being beneficial when we try and help people correct what we perceive are their failures in life. But folks are really comfortable with telling people when they screwed up on cannabis, and man, it's the wrong thing to do.
No, and my daughter has told me that she has mentioned to some of the law enforcement that she works with, she has made the statement, do they call your father Mr. Hashbash?
So she uses your notoriety to her benefit. Beautiful.
They were at her wedding. She had to warn me, there's going to be a bunch of cops there. You need to behave yourself.
Yeah, that's great.
Push it down the road, though, too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, just helps bring it farther down where people, like, I don't know, just being, like, in the hospital last year and being around folk that are, like, you got all these nurses, they're all cool.
Oh, they're all cool with it.
And it's just like, as you talk about it, it's just different. Like, I have a new primary doctor who I had to leave my other one because I was refused care as a cannabis user. And I found this one, and it's one of those things that, like, he goes, it's kept you alive. I'm not changing that.
My primary care physician schedules me, and we spend 30 minutes talking about weed and 5 minutes talking about whatever I came there for. And honestly,
they question us now. They want to know more. And
he wants to do level 3 trials at Wayne State. He's a Wayne State professor, and he wants to do level 3 trials. He sells CBD in his office. He wants people. It says in my medical records when it lists the drugs I use that I use. He doesn't use the word copious. I really wish he'd change it to copious amounts of marijuana, but it does say daily medical marijuana user. So when I do go to the hospital, I get these idiot doctors who show up who say, "Oh, it says here you use marijuana." And I'm like, "Yes, sir. It sure does." And that's the one that tried to change me with his wrong study.
In the last couple of years that we have pushed this farther down. It doesn't seem like it a lot, but it's one of those things that when you're in there, and like I avoided doctors for a long time after I was refused care, and finally finding myself,
I refused going
with cancer. It was one of those things I'm like, listen, I guess I need to start listening to somebody a little bit.
I refused going to the pain clinic because I didn't want the headache. And I ended up going to the pain clinic because I was having problems after my last surgery. And the guy comes in the room, and it just so happened at the time I had also fallen and broken my wrist, and I had this bright pink cast on. And he came in and he thought I was there to talk about the cast. I said, "You better go back and read my record." And he walks back in and he has a urine cup in his hand. And he says, "I'll write you for anything you want. All you got to do is go fill this up. And as long as I said, whoa, wait a minute. I'll tell you everything that's in my system." I said, "That's embarrassing. That is offensive to me, a urine test. I smoke cannabis. He says, I'm not worried about cannabis at all." He said, "I need you to go fill this up." Sure enough, I go fill it up. He comes back to me and he says, "I'm happy to write you the pain medicine. However, I need to switch you off of the Valium you take for your muscle relaxer to a different muscle relaxer because the pain medicine and the muscle relaxer can't be taken together. The Valium and the Valium was being used as a muscle relaxer."
Mm-hmm.
Said, "You can't take that and pain medicine together. It'll make your breathing stop." Well, we certainly don't want that. So we had to make some decisions. And then when it was time that we were able to deal with the pain and handle the pain, we got off of the pain pills and got back onto the Valium.
Mm-hmm.
But and stopped going to the pain clinic because I didn't need them anymore.
No, that was one thing recently. Like honestly, like I take Flexeril from time to time.
That worked for you?
And I don't like I'm dealing with kidney stones right now, and I have this history of them. And it's like one of those things. It's like somebody said, "Well, rather than just giving you this, how about we try this?" And I'm like, sure. And it's like, oh, that's all I really, not that it takes it all away, but it definitely is done the most, towards, helping that overall pain like that, it's interesting, that sometimes we get,
Right. Well, I was shocked when the doctor explained to me that I was having some nerve pain. This was a different experience, but I was having some nerve pain, and the guy said, "I'm going to put you on methadone." He said, "Methadone works better for nerve pain than any opiate I could give you." Why? Because of how it affects the brain. All right, I'll take it. I'd taken methadone for years when I was on pills. I mean, and not to get off pills either. I took methadone because I lost my health insurance, and the opiate I was taking was very expensive. It was a time release. And I went from $350 a month to $35 a month. And I got the same pain relief. Mm-hmm. So, it made sense to be a methadone patient at that point. And I explain it to people because it's not even though it was invented by the Nazis, it's not the insidious drug that people make it out to be for dope fiends. It actually has some uses that, if you know what it is and how to use it. So no offense to Jamie. I use that word. I'm not.
What, fiend?
Jamie, no, matter of fact, Mrs. Briggs right now, I feel the presence screaming at me because I refer to potheads or anybody else as a dope fiend. I mean, I don't mind. I'm a proud dope fiend.
Dope fiend. No offense, Jamie.
No offense, Jamie. Well,
hey, Yeah.
I don't
true, I guess, man.
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
No.
we're kind of far afield from some of the conversations we were going to talk about, but we're sharing personal stories of healing, and that's always appropriate as far as I'm concerned. So,
Well,
and
it
I
helps
think,
with the misinformation.
well, it also again goes, in my opinion, back to the beginning, really, when we were talking about just normalization of cannabis use in our lives, and it touched on a lot of things, that were probably not whatever, but
it's a
I
good
think
conversation.
Well,
I appreciate it because it is something that that's me. Like,
I would ask you, do you still decide what shirt you're wearing when you leave the house? Does it have a pot leaf? Does it not have a pot leaf? Because I grabbed the next shirt on the pile. Today was Coleman Young's shirt that I'm wearing. But most days I have a pot leaf on one sleeve and a Hash Bash logo on the other because I wear overalls and nobody can see the big weed shirt.
my overalls are all tie-dye, so. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like, I grab whatever, honestly, for myself.
I don't care where I'm going. I wear it.
No.
If you
I shop
require
at
me
Kroger with a big
me
weed.
to wear a shirt, it's going to have a pot leaf on it.
It again, the normalization is just, this is even more off of subject, but like somebody was asking me about mushrooms, and I said, well, fungus and all that. I go, do I believe maybe it might be legal nationally before the other? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's ingrained, like from little kids, the Smurfs, the whole thing, the shroom. It's part of so much deeper, almost than the leaf.
What's interesting is the studies done on mushrooms were not like the studies done on cannabis or marijuana or weed or whatever you want to call it.
They studied for actual benefit.
For benefit, and they have military telling them that we've been using it on our guys for benefit. They have all kinds of therapists who are telling them through studies that we're using it for benefit,
Right.
and forget about places like where I'm at in Ann Arbor that
where it's
legal. It's legal here.
Yeah.
I mean, the weed I'm smoking isn't legal here. I can't smoke a joint out on the street, but I can eat a mushroom. It's still a civil infraction to smoke weed in Ann Arbor, I believe.
All the Newsweek articles, all the different things that have come out with, the benefit side of different things, certain states moving forward, even our own state moving forward with what we're, decriminalization or whatever, which is honestly what we prefer, versus legalization, I guess.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Or in addition to.
Well, yeah, and I just, I don't want to see the same shit happen.
Well, I mean, if you're going to grow enough and you're going to put it in the market, then maybe we should look into your shit like we do tomatoes.
Sure.
Okay? If you grow enough tomatoes and you put them in the market, the USDA is up your ass. If you have a little stand out in front of your house and you grow tomatoes in your backyard, code enforcement in your community doesn't care.
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
may have to pay a fee. Some communities you have to pay a fee to have a roadside stand vendor license or whatever.
Right.
But it's nowhere near the way that commercial facilities are inspected. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just, that's like I said, it's kind of like one of those side subjects too, where it's just like, but it's like you see the same normalization of these things, and as we keep moving forward,
We see normalization in Michigan because we've had, medical law since 2008 and it's now 22. So when you look at that, I mean, plus we've had several votes of the people to support both medical and legalization in 8 and 18. But in other states, they're not moving forward. In other states, they're really just stuck in that same hamster wheel of hate that they've always had for cannabis. That's why their people come to Michigan for vacations now instead of other places.
Some have moved forward. Some have moved even farther behind the 8 ball while resetting the rack.
Yeah.
So they think they're legalizing pot, or they think they're going to do this or that or the other thing, but they pass laws that say you can't have any flower. They pass laws that say,
no home cultivation. Right.
No home cultivation.
Oh yeah, that's.
Yeah, I'm agoraphobic. I haven't left my house in 13 years. What do? I mean, that's not me, but That
Yeah.
guy's entitled to have weed
Yeah.
and grow it himself.
Yeah, no, the home grow is, you know, my home grow this last year helped me through a whole lot this year. So, you know,
Well, and growing is a lot more than just about the end product itself. It's about giving you a something that you
Yeah.
can look forward to nurture,
process.
get inside the
touching the
plant,
plant, being part of the earth.
lower your stress level.
They have no
Although-
concept. The people that make the rules have no concept of this
No.
at all. That you could tell them, you couldn't parade enough people in front of them to convince
But
them.
Adam, if you ask them, is growing a vegetable garden good for your soul? They'd say yes. If you said, is growing a flower garden good for your soul? They'd say yes. And you said, if growing a cannabis garden good for your soul? They'd say no.
Yeah,
And it doesn't
no,
make any sense that the concept of we can garden this or this and it's beneficial, but gardening this makes you a horrible person. There's nobody that looks at that as logical.
Yeah, no, I like in my own situation. I got two neighbors. One, you hear over the fence, weed. But the other side, you know, I had 12 plants growing out there that got to be 5 feet tall and nice, healthy plants. In that, they, you know, I talked to my neighbor and she gave me a bunch of tomatoes, and I said, "Oh, thank you, thank you. When this is ready, you want any of this?" And she's like, she says to me, "Well, I don't smoke, but however, I've loved watching them grow. I've loved to see what you've been doing out there, you know, building these things, like just seeing them grow." And I'm not buying it. I did it before it wasn't even legal, but you know.
I got a neighbor who, a guy in my neighborhood who literally called the police on one of our neighbors, and the cops told her that she may want to do some bending of her plants because he's going to be a real pain in the ass. I mean, and he bitches about the smell, and he lives between the two of us, so I get a big kick out of the fact that when the wind's blowing in his direction, that, you know, he may not know where it's coming from, but it bothers him. Because I'm offended by a lot of smells too, but I can't do anything about it.
Sure.
Curry is a terrible smell.
Perfume or,
Perfume.
you know.
Have you ever lived near a hog farm? I mean, I know.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I mean, you know, farms and that all, you know, any agriculture is going to have some kind of smell.
And cannabis, the growing of cannabis, that was one of the things they used against us, was that if you're going to have these home grows, it's going to stink. Well, if you want to make up a law that says you can't have any odor, then do that, because we can handle the odor of a grow when it's indoors. That's not a problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
We can't handle an outdoor grow, but
yeah,
I can't not smell your roses either.
Yeah, you know, you see with all the outdoor grows around Michigan.
Well, I guess it comes down to local ordinances and whether or not they have control over smell and what the consequences for the smell, regardless of the sourcing itself.
Nuisance. It's like,
I know.
I hate to say this to you, but they consider it a nuisance, and that's what they go after you on, is the nuisance law.
Yep. And of course, it's impossible for you to control the smell of maturing cannabis plants. If anyone has ever tried, I know that they would have failed. Thanks for joining us, Jim Salam.
Hey, long time no see, guys.
I do.
Good to see you.
Oh,
talking about cannabis smell in the city.
Can I brag? Phone call from John Sinclair.
Nice.
Tell him we all said hi, Adam.
Yeah, definitely. He probably called to say hello when he saw me show up on the show. It's nice.
I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah.
Jim, what's been going on with you? We've been talking quite openly for about an hour and 45 minutes here.
Yeah, I've been traveling a little bit, but working on some music and working on my latest Weed Martin shtick. And just coming up with some good songs and trying to get that nice and tight. But helping out some friends too in the Muskegon area who have
That's right.
dispensary. They joined up with the owners of this dispensary that was called Bellasol, and they all got together and renamed it, rebranded it, and they've got a consumption lounge license. They're going to hopefully be getting soon, right next door, and then it's going to be just a nice little place right there in Muskegon by the water. So I'm excited for them. That's called 420 Shore in Muskegon on Peck Street.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
You'll still find me on the beach smoking weed, but I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they took all the fun out of it for me when they made it no longer a crime to do this stuff. So I look for places where it's illegal to do this, and that's where I do it. So,
Yeah,
Real
Jim,
seeking Adam.
It'll be a food truck type truck where you can probably go and grab some pre-rolls right there at the beach too.
That's beautiful.
even better.
Yep. That is beautiful. I love the concept.
Yeah. So that's
A lot going on.
you know,
Right.
I'm still, you know, watching what's going on in Michigan and in the federally what's happening with cannabis and how things are changing and kind of stalled, but
Chip, help me understand. Would you need to have a secure transporter to deliver cannabis to the food truck on site, or would you be able to load it at the dispo ahead of time and then drive it directly to there on your own?
I would imagine drive it directly because there's already delivery that pretty much allows something very similar.
You have to, up to 50. You can do it directly up to 15 ounces at a time in the car.
Right.
Or if you want to use the transportation company, then you can do more.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Well,
I mean,
Transport
cool seeing all
company
this shit.
can reload the truck that's already out.
yeah.
right.
I mean, I guess if that's, just really a delivery thing, then, that'd be great,
Unfortunately, by the time all this happens, the laws are going to change. And we may be able to do a lot of this shit we're talking about that we can't do right now without any problem.
Yeah.
Because they eventually realize that they made those mistakes.
That's how it works, man. The lawmakers go, hey, we made a bunch of mistakes. Better fix these really quick and make it easier for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and then also look at, I don't know if that's a situation they have going on out there, what Jim's talking about, but a friend of mine owns Lucky's up in Big Rapids. He's got a venue that holds, downstairs is a bar. They're all separate licenses. They're separate businesses. One, you have basically a concert venue that holds about 600 people. And then you have a dispensary up front. And then this huge other spot out back where you can have weddings or, more of a bigger type of a event.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, it's just pulling that off. And is Big Rapids oversaturated? Yeah. But I also think that that's probably the most unique item that anybody could want to go hang out at, a liquor license covers the entire building.
Yeah.
So,
And the fact is, if you're in an oversaturated market, you have to differentiate yourself from everyone else. And that sounds like they've got a lot of assets to do that.
oh yeah, well, it's just that pulling off and connecting with the, you would think that, connecting with the community of students in a way that's not the same. I mean, it's located above the biggest, Shooters is the name of the bar there. It's the biggest, party bar in Big Rapids. So you've got that going on, and you have the stays upstairs, and then this concert thing. It's just, to me,
Location, man.
yeah, no, that's why I love about
Big Rapids is a lot like Muskegon. Muskegon is oversaturated. I mean,
and he's in Muskegon too. I mean, he has a place there too. But
yeah, it seems everyone does. And then there are a couple of places that are opening up that are $1 million complexes. That one's I think they're gonna have a bowling alley, a restaurant.
yeah, three different.
They want to have all this in one little spot of a mall type place. So it's interesting to see what shakes out there and everywhere.
Jim, I have a quick question. Is it a vacant mall?
Is it right now?
Yes.
I'm not sure. I don't know the
Okay.
specifics on the development at all.
Because I can
I think
honestly, I see cannabis as one of those things that could take over a lot of these empty spots. We
It's
saw
a
that
destination
Detroit,
location.
we
Yeah.
saw that in Detroit with an illegal market, there were 285 illegal dispensaries. in storefronts that were not being used for anything, most of which you wouldn't open a business in because they were in undesirable locations. So I see these malls that are literally vacant as great opportunities if the community's in, because now the landlord's just looking for money. That's all he cares about.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the evolution of the industry, though, because at one point you could open up something in an old photo mat, a little teeny tiny, a hut, basically, and be successful because people would drive to you because of that. Now there are so many simply cannabis retail sessions out there that in order to differentiate yourself, you have to expand not within the cannabis industry, but to other interesting things like bowling alleys and like access to bars,
Arcades, yeah,
Live music.
record stores,
access to outdoor venue, right?
Live music all the time. That's my big aim.
live music all
That's
the time,
me,
brother.
but
I dig
it
that.
is bringing all that together with a lot of different people who I've met over the years who I'm, again, an old deadhead and I'm old hippie, but, connecting with all those different people over these years who now are in bands or managing bands or doing that and having access to the, I don't want to ever say like the youth, but what people are into, in finding that space, because honestly, that's where everything leads from.
I'll say that's the only benefit, as I see it, to these celebrities getting involved with their own brands. There are very, very few, if any, because I don't believe the things I've heard, who say, you know what, this bag of weed that I have is something I really like, and I'm putting this brand out. Instead, a guy like Rob hopes that Snoop Dogg calls him on the phone and says, yeah, I'll represent your brand. And the brand and the guy have nothing to do with each other than a business contract.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. So you're not smoking his weed. You're just being pimped out by him.
That's I tell everybody right now, because again, I do branding, I do that kind of design work, all that kind of stuff. But when I'm doing it, it's like I'm telling you right now, I don't want to deal with any celebrity brands besides, people who I actually kind of like or believe in. But I have ideas for a celebrity brand, but it's like me bringing them the idea, not because every single one wants to expend your time, energy, and everything on them. And then for the hope and dream that it's going to sell.
Yeah.
Well, I want my own celebrity brand. I just need to become a celebrity first.
I posted today a story on my Facebook page dealing with that said most celebrity brands are not the top selling brands in their markets, and in fact, most of them don't bring any additional cachet. We've said it on this program and other programs for a long, long time. A celebrity face on something might get me to buy it once, but if it's not a quality product, then I'm not going to. And the fact is, when you're from California making a deal with people in Michigan growing something, oftentimes it's who's got the best deal for me, and who's got the best deal for me are the guys who have more bullshit, nasty cannabis.
Well, and
it takes more work than just slapping somebody's face on it. You got to work it and attract people to it, and then it has to stand up to like being worth it for no matter whose face is on it.
I'm less than a quarter mile away from Cookies right now, and I wouldn't go into that store to buy any Cookies products that you could name. But before Cookies came to Detroit, I was a huge fan because it was being grown locally by local guys. They knew how to grow it. It was being grown in small batches, maybe 72, maybe 100. I mean, it was controllable. The quality was there. As soon as they came in with their license and their stuff came out of a metric grow, big grow, totally the product changed. You could see it. You could taste it.
When they opened up the Detroit store, Ryan Basor and I were there for the opening, and we purchased some cannabis and then went over to Jamie Lowell's house to actually smoke it. And to be honest with you, there was some fantastic fucking cannabis we got there on day one. But that was because of what Adam said. At that point, they were using
growers who are actually new.
Put your
But when
best
they-
foot forward, yeah, for that opening day too. Make sure they were stocked.
Oh, it was
Hey, so
sweet.
we are kind of running out of time, but you know, I mean, it was nice to have Josh on earlier. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Anything you want to make sure you get in before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, as a whole, it was great. I loved it, kind of rambling a bit, because that's kind of what I do. But
Fun, right?
touching on subjects that I think, like we said, in the beginning, the whole consumption stuff, the whole, normalizing and bringing it to.
It's
We
just
all have a
cannabis.
story to tell. We all have different things that we talk about. I know cannabis saved me, so that's why I do what I do. Am I the most vocal activist out there? Probably not, but I'm also doing my part.
Anybody helping out in any
and I
way,
think-
at any time, all goes into the whole effort, man. It's all appreciated. And
I think right now in the
for a long
industry,
time.
I think right now in the industry, it's time to start rebuilding a tiny bit. I mean, like industry wise, like just kind of rebridging things and realizing what's out there, because not everybody's in the game for the same reasons. And we all just want to help people, really, in the grand scheme of life. That's all I fucking care about. I mean,
But that's because you came from the marijuana movement.
yeah,
Now-
no, it's true.
And now you're
I think you and I talked about that one time. And
that's my statement, is that my marijuana movement became their cannabis industry, and they need to get back to some of the things that we stood for.
Yeah, I think I don't know, hopefully we all kind of get there in our own way.
They will, and to be honest, they don't have to, because, and this has already been proven, they don't have to, because someone has to be the Budweiser, and Budweiser they didn't want to be the best beer, they wanted to be the king of beers, and they are.
It's a big part of the market. Something that works. That's cheap.
Right.
I mean, that's
But they're all people get tired of mids. You know what I mean? It's the mids are everywhere, and people get tired
But
of them.
I'm also going to argue that there are many, many, many more cannabis users now that it's legal, who would have never touched the product before it was legal, and that skews our numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're over time. We gotta wrap it up quickly.
Yeah, man. So, Rob, thanks a lot again, man. Adam, you want to get anything else in?
No, I've
You were
said
kind of
so
part
much.
of Rob's time, but that's
Yeah, I know.
Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us late, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you guys all as well. I'll try to be on a little bit more.
Cool.
I hope so. And Entheo Fest 2023. Yeah.
That's coming up. NTL
Few
Fest
months.
2023.
What's the
Yes.
date?
September
September 18th, I want to say. Top of my head. Yeah, that's we'll definitely we'll be looking forward to it. The 17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
Well, we'll practice April 1st on the diag.
Yeah.
Warm it up. Warm it up, hopefully, yeah.
It's wonderful that we can do that. Both
I'll get
protests in the same place.
So
Yeah.
cool. Thanks a lot, everybody. Rick, man, I know we're late, but please take all the time you need to wrap us up.
The one thing you can take away from today's conversation is that there's still a lot of work to do in the cannabis world as far as helping shepherd our law through on a statewide level, the local community issues we talked about, as well as the federal things that are still slowly evolving and perhaps not evolving in the right way. If I can encourage you to do one thing, it is stay educated on the subject, stay involved, and try and make a difference locally, because every difference locally changes minds.
Right on.
And get your medical card.
Do that.
Yeah, there's still advantages, lots of advantages for getting your medical card.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Show them we're
All
strong.
right. Yep. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thanks, everybody.